Welcome, my friend, to the sleeping hourglass. The year is 1925. Winter has closed her fist around Alaska. Ice locks the harbors, and snow muffles the sound of the world. In the small coastal town of Nome, a sickness stirs. Diphtheria, ancient and merciless. The cure lies hundreds of miles away, and time is not a friend. Men will harness dogs, and dogs will give everything they have. But among them, one will run farther through deeper storms than all the rest. His name is Togo. Tonight, we will walk and run with him through a world of white silence and unbroken determination. And if you find peace here, you're always welcome to return. Some listeners choose to follow the sleeping hourglass, so they can keep this gentle space close, like a favorite blanket you can pull around your shoulders anytime the world feels too loud. Winter does not come to Alaska with a gentle warning. It descends like a curtain, sudden and absolute, sealing the land in its long embrace. The sun retreats low on the horizon, tracing a path of pale gold before sinking into a darkness that lingers for most of the day. Each dawn is brief, more suggestion than light, and each evening seems to last forever. Nome, perched on the edge of the Bering Sea, feels this change in its bones. The sea itself has stiffened, locked under thick plates of ice that creak in the shifting tide. Waves, once restless, now sleep beneath a crust that reaches far into the bay. The shore lies quiet, save for the occasional groan of ice settling, the sound of a frozen ocean breathing in its sleep. Snow comes early and stays late. It drapes over the rooftops in heavy folds, piles itself along fences, and swallows the roads until only narrow tracks remain. The wind, sharp and unrelenting, carves ridges and hollows in the drifts, reshaping the town each day. Under this pale and shifting architecture, the people move slowly, bundled in fur and wool, faces hidden behind scarves, eyes peering out over frost-bitten cheeks. Time here is not counted in hours but in small, enduring sounds. The muffled crunch of boots on hard, packed snow, the faint creak of sled runners sliding over ice, the rhythmic jingle of harness bells fading into the distance. The world is quieter in winter, yet not silent. There is the low sigh of wind around corners, the whistle through telegraph wires, the occasional bark of a restless dog straining at its tether. In this season, life contracts inward. Families gather around oil lamps, the warm glow barely pushing back the darkness at the window. The air indoors smells of burning wood, drying mittens, and the faint tang of seal oil. Outside, the stars burn brighter than in any city, each one sharp and cold in the blackness. The northern lights come without warning, slipping across the sky like ribbons of green and violet silk, their silent shimmer a reminder that beauty survives even in the harshest cold. This is a place where winter shapes every choice. Ships stop coming once the harbour freezes, their routes vanish under ice too thick for steel hulls to cut. Trains and sled teams carry the lifeline of supplies before the snows grow too deep. People here know the rhythm of scarcity, of stretching flour through long months, of keeping the fire fed against the constant hunger of the cold. Yet there is no fear in this. It is the way things have always been. Nome endures because it understands the terms of life at the edge of the world. Still, in the winter of 1925, there is an edge to the air, something just beneath the surface calm. No one yet speaks of danger. No one yet imagines the journey that will soon unfold. But the conditions for it are quietly assembling, the ice sealing the sea, the snow deepening in the passes, the wind sharpening each day. The stage is being set without anyone noticing. The dogs feel it first. They are the lifeblood of this place, their paws carrying mail, food, and medicine across the miles when no other transport can reach. In the kennels along the edge of town, they pace, bark, and watch the horizon. Their breath rises in white clouds, their fur thickening in preparation for the work that will come when called. A good sled dog knows the difference between the ordinary days and the days that will be remembered. The men, too, are attuned to these signs. Mushers tend to their teams, checking harness lines, mending sleds, and storing away extra food. The bond between man and dog here is not sentimental, but essential. Trust is built mile by mile, in storms and over ice, in shared danger and survival. In a land where the weather can turn in moments, this trust is the only thing that matters. Beyond the town limits, the land stretches in all directions, white, silent, unbroken. Forests of black spruce bend under the weight of snow. Rivers lie still under ice so clear you can see stones on the bottom, locked in place. Mountain passes narrow under wind, carved drifts, their trails hidden until someone breaks them anew. The land holds its own council in winter, keeping secrets until it chooses to reveal them. For now, Nome moves through its days without urgency. The storekeepers tally their goods by lamplight. Children walk to the small schoolhouse, their breath trailing behind them in soft clouds. Hunters set traps in the early hours, returning with rabbits or fox pelts before the light fades again. The doctor makes his rounds on foot, carrying his black bag from house to house. But winter is not only stillness, it is a waiting place, a season where the smallest change in routine can be felt like a tremor through the snow. A stranger arriving in town, a message sent down the telegraph line, a whisper in the saloon that someone is ill. The people here know that in winter, news moves slowly, but trouble moves fast, somewhere beyond the horizon, beyond even the reach of rumor. Events are already aligning. A child's cough, a doctor's frown, a message tapped out on a wire, each is a snowflake in a gathering storm. Soon, the stillness will break. The runners will leave their tracks across the frozen miles. Men and dogs will run against time and against winter itself. For now, though, Nome sleeps under its white blanket. The wind hums through the darkness. The harbour ice lies unbroken. And in the deep cold, the story waits, patient as the northern lights, for its moment to rise. But even in the deepest stillness, change begins with the smallest sound. A cough in the night, almost lost beneath the sigh of the wind. It is late in the day when the sound first comes, a dry, rasping cough that cuts through the muffled peace of winter. Outside, the snow falls in a steady whisper, pressing against the windows. Inside, the small house is dim, lit by a single oil lamp that throws long shadows along the wooden walls. The child sits bundled in blankets, cheeks flushed with fever. His breath catches, then trembles in his chest before the cough forces its way out again. To any passerby, it might seem no more than a touch of winter's common cold, the kind every family in Nome endures each year. But to the man who bends over the bed, Dr. Curtis Welch, the sound carries a weight heavier than frost. Welch has practiced medicine here long enough to hear danger in its earliest note. He knows the timbre of an ordinary cough and the darker undertone of something else. Something that creeps through the throat and tightens it, like a noose. Diphtheria. The word itself seems to settle like ice in his mind. He leans closer, examining the child's throat by lamplight. There it is, the pale, grey membrane clinging where it does not belong, a sign as old as the disease itself. Outside, the wind rattles faintly at the door, as if to remind him of the miles of snow between this bed and any help that might come. In a larger city, there would be antitoxin on hand, waiting in a glass vial. Here, on the frozen edge of Alaska, there is none. His last supply expired months ago. A new shipment was meant to come before winter set in, but the harbour froze early, sealing Nome off from the world. The shelves are empty. The boy's mother watches the doctor's face, searching for reassurance. He gives her the gentlest words he can find, but they do not warm the cold knot forming in his chest. Diphtheria does not wait. It spreads like frost along a window, silently, until the whole pane is covered. By morning, another child is coughing, then another. The town is small, only a few thousand souls, but in winter, people leave close together, gathered in tight circles against the cold. The air inside is warm, damp with breath, a perfect place for an unseen enemy to move from person to person. Welch visits each home, his boots crunching through the snow, his breath clouding in the pale light. In his black bag, he carries only the tools he can still use, a stethoscope, his notebook, what small medicines remain. He feels the shape of the problem growing with each door he opens. The news moves through the town as quickly as the disease itself. At the general store, voices lower when the doctor's name is mentioned. At the schoolhouse, mothers keep their children home. The church bells ring on Sunday, but fewer people come. Those who do glance at one another with guarded eyes, wondering whose cough is the next sign. By the third day, Welch is certain this is no passing illness. It is an outbreak in its first breath. Without the antitoxin, the children will die. The adults too, if it spreads far enough. He thinks of the frozen harbour, the ships trapped beyond the ice, the long miles to the rail line. He thinks of the snow-choked trails, the bitter wind that can freeze a man's skin in minutes. And still, the disease will not wait. He sits late into the night at his desk, the lamp burning low, the ledger open before him. Each name is written in his careful hand. The sick, the suspected, the at risk. The list is short now, but he can feel how quickly it will lengthen. He sends a message by telegraph to the health authorities far away. Urgent need for diphtheria antitoxin. Nome completely cut off. Situation grave. The telegraph wires hum in the darkness, carrying his plea across miles of wilderness, across rivers locked in ice, across mountains buried in snow. Somewhere, men will read his words in warm rooms far from this frozen silence. Somewhere, they will decide what can be done. But until then, there is only the waiting. Outside, the night is sharp and clear. The aurora sweeps across the sky, green fire rippling above the town. The dogs in their kennels shift and whine, sensing something in the air. Not yet the call to run, but the tension that comes before it. In the houses, lamps burn late. Mothers sit beside their children's beds, damp cloths cooling fevered brows. Fathers stand in doorways, watching the street, as if expecting to see the cure itself come sliding in on a sled. Welch lies awake, listening to the faint coughs carried through the stillness. He knows that by the time help arrives, if it arrives, the snow will have deepened, the wind will have sharpened, and the miles between Nanana and Nome will be harder than ever to cross. It will take more than men. It will take dogs bred for this land, dogs whose hearts are as strong as their legs, dogs who will not stop even when the cold cuts deep. The thought is only a shadow now, a distant possibility. The town does not yet speak of a relay, or of the names that will one day be remembered. For now they speak in whispers, as if not to wake the illness from its shallow sleep. But the disease is already awake, already moving. And somewhere in the night, the sound of its first breath lingers, a reminder that time is shorter than anyone wants to believe. In the hush of winter, the smallest sound can change everything, and soon the whole town will learn how far that first cough can carry. The harbour is no longer a place of water. It is a frozen mirror stretching to the horizon, white and unyielding, its surface scored by the faint traces of wind. The tide still moves beneath, but its pulse is muffled under the armour of ice. The small fishing boats that once swayed on cold swells now rest in stiff formation, their hulls gripped by winter as though anchored in stone. Their masts creak faintly in the wind, lonely markers of a season without voyages. Nome stands at the edge of this silent harbour, facing a sea that can no longer carry its needs. The last ship of the year, the Victoria, had departed before the first great snowstorm, its deck stacked with the last outbound mail and the last promise of supplies until spring. The men who watched her leave had known, as they always did, that the next ship would not arrive for months. But this winter feels different, colder, longer, less forgiving. The telegraph office hums with a strange urgency. Messages travel outward, tapped into the brass key by the operator's gloved hands. The lines stretch across the miles, carrying words to Anchorage, to Juneau, to Seattle. Words like urgent, isolation, diphtheria. The wires sing their thin metal song in the cold, but they cannot break ice or bridge the frozen miles. They carry voices, not relief. Beyond the town's cluster of wooden buildings, the trail to the south lies under deep snow, the path buried in the shifting drifts. The mail carriers who run it in better weather now turn back from blinding gusts. The nearest train station, in Nenana, might as well be on another continent for all the good it can do in the heart of winter. Even the hardy few who travel on foot or with dog teams speak of the trail with a new caution, the way one might speak of a restless river. Nome has known isolation before, but there is something heavier in the air this time, a weight not entirely made of snow. The townspeople walk slower, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that no help will come quickly if they need it. The general store still has flour, sugar, and canned goods, but each sack and tin is counted more carefully now. The pharmacy shelves are thin. The doctor's small supply of medicine sits behind a locked door, guarded more by scarcity than by any key. At night, the lamps glow like islands in the darkness. Families gather close to their stoves, the heat radiating into their bones. They speak quietly, telling stories to fill the long hours, but their voices carry an undercurrent of unease. Outside, the snow keeps falling, fine and dry, settling over the roofs until the buildings seem to shrink beneath its weight. Dogs shift in their kennels, their fur crusted with frost from their own breath. They sense the change in their humans, the watchfulness, the quiet tension. They know the trails better than any man, but even they cannot make the ice retreat or shorten the miles. For now, they wait, eating heartily, sleeping deeply, gathering strength they do not yet know they will need. The mayor receives word through the telegraph. Anchorage has heard the plea for medicine. There is antitoxin in the territory, but it lies hundreds of miles away, in a place accessible only by rail and then by the frozen trails of the interior. The question is not whether it exists, but whether it can be brought here before the illness spreads too far. In the morning, the horizon is lost in a white haze where sea and sky meet in the same muted colour. The air tastes of salt and cold metal. Nome is a town surrounded not by walls, but by an unbroken wilderness, forest, tundra, frozen sea. It is as if the world has drawn a white curtain around it, closing the people inside with their own breath and fears. Children play in the snow as they always do, their laughter rising like steam into the air. But their parents watch them more closely now, listening for that particular cough, the one that signals something far more dangerous than frostbite. The sickness is still a whisper, not yet a shout. But everyone feels its approach like the distant vibration of a coming train. In the evenings, the telegraph key still clicks, sending and receiving its staccato language. The operator works by lamplight, rubbing his hands to keep the feeling in his fingers. He knows the names of the people on the other end, knows the strain in their replies. Words are exchanged. Possible relay. Dog teams. Weather worsening. The solution forming out there in the dark will require courage measured in miles, not in messages. And yet there is still waiting. Waiting for a plan. Waiting for the first runner to take the trail. Waiting for the sound of dogs breathing hard in the cold, harness bells chiming in rhythm with pounding paws. For now, the silence is broken only by the wind and the tap of the telegraph. Two voices speaking into a winter that listens but does not answer. Nome is no stranger to endurance. The miners who came here during the gold rush faced storms, hunger, and months without ships. They survived by leaning into the land's demands, meeting it on its own terms. But even the oldest among them know that the difference between hardship and disaster can be as thin as the ice over a river. Strong one day, breaking the next, the harbour remains still. The ice holds, the town waits. The illness, patient and unhurried, waits as well. Somewhere far to the south, a plan is beginning to take shape, but it will be tested by storms and darkness before it reaches this frozen place. And in that fragile pause between knowing and acting, the people of Nome feel the weight of every mile, a distance measured not in geography, but in time. Waiting is not a stillness, it is a slow tightening. In Nome, each day now feels like a rope being drawn closer to its breaking point. The lamps burn earlier in the afternoon, their flames trembling with every draught. The walls of each home seem to hold their breath. Families draw closer together, not just to share warmth, but to share the weight of unspoken thoughts. Mothers mend clothes by lamplight, their needles glinting in the glow. Fathers carve small wooden toys or repair tools. Anything to keep their hands moving while their minds circle the same worry. Children are quieter than usual. They sense it, the way the air feels heavier as though the snow outside presses not only on the rooftops but on the hearts within. They play, but their games are subdued, glances flicking toward the doorway whenever someone coughs. A cough is no longer just a sound, it is a shadow. In the small clinic, Dr. Curtis Welch sits at his desk, the ledger open before him. Each name he writes is an anchor in the slow, moving storm. The sick, the suspected, the ones he fears will be next. His pencil scratches softly in the stillness, the sound joined now and then by the groan of the stove. On the wall above his desk hangs a calendar, its days crossed off with firm, even lines. He does not need the paper to tell him how few are left before the illness claims more than he can save. Messages have gone out over the telegraph, please sent southward, and replies have come back, short bursts of hope in clipped words. Serum available. Plan being formed. Yet hope delivered in dots and dashes feels fragile. The snow outside thickens daily, and the wind sharpens. If a plan exists, it must travel not through wire, but over frozen miles. The town feels this truth, even if few speak it aloud. At the general store, customers move quietly among the shelves. No one lingers, no one wastes breath in long conversation. At the post office, people gather not for letters. There will be none until spring, but to hear if there is news. Most leave with the same expression they arrived with, watchful, resigned. Outside, the world is a shifting mosaic of white. The wind blows patterns across the snow that vanish almost as soon as they form. In the kennels on the edge of town, the dogs raise their heads when the wind changes, their ears flicking at distant sounds. Now and then, the cry of one dog carries far enough to be heard by the families indoors, a reminder that strength waits beyond the walls, still unused. At night, the aurora returns, green ribbons curling and unrolling across the black sky. They are beautiful in their indifference. The lights have no message, no comfort. They shine as they did before the sickness, as they will after, regardless of how many lamps in Nome burn late tonight. The waiting does not pass evenly. For the sick, each hour is a tide pulling further from shore. For their families, the days blur, marked by the slow rhythm of care, wiping a brow, bringing a drink, listening for breathing in the dark. For the doctor, the hours are heavier still. Each morning begins with the same thought. Will the medicine come before the list in my ledger grows too long? Some in the town prepare in quiet ways. Extra wood is split and stacked, food set aside. Sleds are checked, harnesses inspected. No one knows yet who will be called to the trail, but the land here has taught its people not to be caught unready. Even without clear orders, readiness is a habit. In the evenings, when the wind dies down, there is a hush so deep it feels as though the town lies at the bottom of a frozen sea. Footsteps crunching through the snow sound unnaturally loud. A door closing echoes down the empty street. Inside, the lamps burn on, the yellow light painting small worlds against the dark outside. Dr. Welch walks home, late from the clinic each night, his boots cutting new paths through the snow. He looks up at the stars as he goes, their cold light older than anything here. Somewhere far away, plans are being made. Somewhere far away, the serum waits in a glass vial, motionless. He imagines it in its box, silent, potent, unaware of the distance between where it is and where it must be. And still, the days slip by. The cough in one house becomes two coughs in another. The list grows. The waiting tightens. The town becomes a vessel holding not just people, but their collective breath. Outside, the dogs in the kennels shift and stir, their eyes glinting in the lamplight. They are built for movement, for the long trail, but for now, they too wait, their energy coiled like rope in a sled, ready to be pulled. The illness is not yet roaring, but it is moving. Everyone can feel it. And when the first call comes, when someone says the plan is set, the team's chosen, the stillness will break in a moment, and the dogs will answer with the music of harness bells and the pounding of paws. But until that moment arrives, Nome sits beneath its blanket of snow, counting its days in lamplight and silence. And in that silence, a decision begins to form, a call that will carry beyond the telegraph wires into the cold, into the waiting hearts of men and dogs alike. The telegraph wires hum in the stillness, their thin voices cutting through the muffled snow. In the dim light of the Nome telegraph office, gloved hands tap out the plea, short bursts of urgency bound for the outside world. It is not the sort of message one forgets. Diphtheria epidemic, need antitoxin, stop, children dying. From far-off anchorage to the modest depot in Nanana, the message travels, searching for hands willing to move faster than winter itself. Ships cannot come. The harbour is gripped by ice thick enough to bear the weight of a small town. No train will cross the wilderness to Nome. The rails simply do not reach this far. The sky is useless. The winter storms would swallow a plane whole. The cure can go only so far by train, and the rest must be carved by sled runners over snow that does not yield. There is no meeting in a grand hall, no assembly beneath banners or brass. The call spreads the way sound carries in the Arctic, not by volume, but by persistence. A knock on a door, a muffled conversation in a sled yard, a nod across the counter of a supply store. One musher hears it, then another, until the knowledge runs like a current under the frozen skin of Alaska. It will take a chain, one team handing the burden to the next, night and day, without pause, until the journey is done. The miles are measured in hundreds. The temperatures sink to 60 below. The wind will scar the skin raw, and the frost will chew at the lungs. Those who step forward do so knowing that the wilderness will test not only their dogs, but every ounce of will within them. In Nome, the doctor counts days like falling snowflakes, each one vanishing too quickly. The serum is still far away in Anchorage, where it will be packed into a small metal cylinder no larger than a loaf of bread. Inside, a few dozen vials, cloudy liquid in glass, will mean the difference between life and death. By rail, the cylinder can reach Nanana. Beyond that point, the iron tracks end, and the white silence begins. Nanana itself is a small place, more a crossing of paths than a destination. Yet from here, the path westward leads to every settlement, every outpost, strung like dim lanterns along the edge of the world. Mushers here know the land not as a line on a map, but as something felt in the bones. The way the wind shifts before a storm, the groan of river ice beneath the runners, the smell of snow carried from far off mountains. Leonhard Seppeler hears the news in Nome, his mind already moving ahead of the words. He has run these miles before. He knows their weight in hours and heartbeats, but there are others too. Wild Bill Shannon in Tullavana, Charlie Olson near Golovin, Gunnar Kasson in Bluff. Men with teams bred for endurance, for the kind of cold that kills if you stop moving too long. There is no glamour in the decision. No one asks if the work is fair or if it will be remembered. The call is not for honor. It is for survival. And in the small, tight-knit world of Alaska in 1925, survival is shared. The child coughing in Nome might be your neighbors, but here, neighbors stretch for hundreds of miles, and kinship is measured by the trail. Dogs are redded, harnesses mended, sleds inspected by lantern light. Fur parkas are pulled from hooks where they have hung all winter. Still stiff with frost from the last long run, each musher prepares in the quiet way of one who has done such things before. No speeches, no ceremony, only the calm, deliberate rhythm of readiness. They know the trail will not be kind. The Yukon River is locked in ice, but ice shifts, groans. breaks when it feels like breaking. Forest trails will be choked with drifts taller than a man. There will be open stretches of tundra where the wind has teeth, and mountains where the air itself feels thin and sharpened. They will run in darkness more than daylight, with only the green sweep of aurora above to remind them the sky still exists. And yet the call is answered, not by one, but by many. In the small space between necessity and impossibility, a relay is born. A plan is drawn. From Nanana, Wild Bill Shannon will take the first leg, driving through the night toward Talavana. There, he will pass the cylinder to Edgar Callan's, and so it will go from hand to hand, sled to sled, until the last team reaches Nome. Each leg will be as long as the musher can stand before frostbite, exhaustion, or the needs of the dogs force him to stop. The relay is a living thing, breathing through the lungs of men and dogs, stretching its limbs across the wilderness. Each musher knows he is only a link in the chain, but without each link, the whole will break. The cylinder is not just medicine. It is a promise carried through the snow. In the towns and villages along the route, lamps will burn through the night as people listen for the approach of sled runners. The sound will be faint at first, a thin whisper of wood on ice, the soft padding of paws. Then it will grow into the jingle of harness bells and the low breath of dogs working the trail. Hands will be ready to pass the burden forward without delay. The call to the mushers is not a command. It is an invitation to endure, to defy the distance and the cold for the sake of lives unseen. No one knows yet how hard the miles will be, how deep the storms, how thin the margin between success and tragedy. They only know that if they do not try, there will be nothing left to save. The telegraph wires have gone still now, their work done. The rest will be decided by muscle instinct and courage. In the darkness of a January night, the first team stands ready, the dogs shifting in their harnesses, steam curling from their breath. Somewhere ahead lies the cure. Somewhere ahead lies the next musher waiting in the cold. The wind picks up. A voice calls softly to the dogs. The sled begins to move, and with that, the race has begun. Far to the east, in the quiet yard of a Nome kennel, a small but fierce dog stirs at the sound of distant bells. Soon, his own journey will begin, and it will take him farther than any of them can yet imagine. The wind that sweeps the Alaskan coast does not care for beginnings. It has seen too many storms born and spent, lives started and ended, to linger over any one story. Yet in the winter of 1913, within the modest wooden walls of Leonhard Sapola's kennel in Nome, a small Siberian husky pup opens his eyes to that wind for the first time. He is not impressive to look at. His legs are shorter, his frame lighter than the others in the litter. His coat is soft but unremarkable, a mottling of grey and cream. If you did not look too closely, you might think him destined for a quiet life, perhaps to be given away as a pet to some family in town. Sapola, a man who has lived his life on snow and ice, notices the difference. He knows the kind of dog that thrives in the harness. Broad-shouldered, thick-furred, steady. This pup, he thinks, will never pull his weight on the trail. He names him Togo, after a Japanese admiral famous for bold maneuvers at sea. Though at the time, the name feels more like a joke than a prophecy. Togo does not take well to being left behind. While his littermates grow accustomed to the yard, he spends his early days testing fences, nosing at latches, looking for a way out. There is something in him that refuses the idea of boundaries. When the team leaves for a training run, the sound of sled runners cutting over snow becomes more than he can bear. He howls. He paces. And then, one day, he finds his opening. The team has barely cleared the edge of Nome when Sepola hears the faint patter of extra paws behind the sled. He turns and sees a blur, small, determined, and impossibly fast, gaining ground on the team. It is Togo, running with the reckless joy of one who has finally found the road he was meant to take. Sepola's first instinct is annoyance. The pup will exhaust himself, freeze, or worse. But Togo does not falter. Mile after mile, he keeps pace, darting between the drifts, eyes fixed on the moving line of dogs ahead. When they stop to rest, the pup collapses into the snow, chest heaving, but there is a light in his eyes that no reprimand can dim. That light is the first hint of what Sepola has misjudged. He begins letting Togo run alongside, not in the harness but free. A shadow to the team. The pup learns the rhythm of the trail. When to dig in against the pull of the wind, how to read the lines of ice for hidden cracks, when to follow a scent and when to ignore it. But freedom alone will not make a sled dog. The day comes when Sepola decides to test him in the harness. Togo is small enough to slip under the tagline, wriggling free before the sled even moves. The first few tries are chaos, tangles of rope, annoyed glances from the larger dogs. Yet once the sled begins to move and the tension in the line steadies, something changes. Togo leans into the pull, head low, legs driving. The rope no longer feels like a trap. It feels like belonging. In those early years, Togo earns a reputation not just for speed, but for cunning. He can read the trail the way a sailor reads the sea, sensing shifts in snow and wind that others miss. If a path seems impassable, he will find a new one, threading the team through ice fields and narrow passes without hesitation. More than once, his decisions save hours of travel, and sometimes their lives. Still, he is not without trouble. When not on the trail, Togo remains a master escape artist, slipping past gates to wander Nome's snowy streets. He charms the townspeople, but Sepola knows each disappearance means another search in the cold. More than once, he considers selling the dog, trading mischief for peace. And yet, every time Togo returns, tail high, eyes bright, the thought fades. By the time he is 4, Togo is no longer the smallest in spirit, if still in size. Sepola begins testing him as a leader. The front of the team, where the dog must not only run, but choose the way. Many fail here. The front is not for those who need the comfort of following. It is for those who trust their own instincts, who can pull a dozen others into line with their certainty. On the first try, Togo takes to it as though he had been waiting for this moment all his life. He reads Sepola's voice not just as sound, but as intent. When the wind cuts the command short, he seems to know what was meant. When the trail forks, he does not hesitate. In storms, he lowers his head against the snow and drives forward until the path reappears beneath his paws. By 1917, Togo is Sepola's undisputed leader. Together they win races and make long, treacherous runs across Norton Sound, a frozen stretch of Bering Sea that can crack and shift underfoot without warning. Time and again, Togo guides the team safely across, earning a place not just in Sepola's trust, but in the quiet lore of Nome's mushers. Looking back, Sepola will say that Togo was born for the trail. But those early trials, the escapes, the defiance, the stubborn will to run, were as much a part of his making as any race or expedition. Greatness, after all, often begins in the refusal to be left behind. And so, when the call comes in 1925 for mushers to carry the serum across Alaska, there is no question in Sepala's mind. The race will be brutal. The miles will be longer than any other team will face, and at the head of his sled there will be only one dog, small in stature, unshakable in spirit, who can lead them through. Far from the gathering teams in Nanana, Sepala begins to ready his own in Nome. The harnesses are checked, the runners smoothed, and at the front, Togo waits, his eyes fixed on a horizon only he seems able to see. The morning light in Nome is pale and hesitant, seeping across the snow in a thin wash of silver. It is January 1925, and the air feels sharper than glass. Inside his kennel, Leonhard Sepala moves with quiet precision. The kind of stillness that comes from knowing there is no time to waste, and yet not hurrying a thing. Around him, the dogs stir. The younger ones are eager, muscles quivering with the restlessness of youth. They snap playfully at the cold air, their breath rising in clouds. But Sepala's eyes are drawn, as they always are, to the front corner of the yard. There, lying in a patch of hard, packed snow, is Togo. The dog lifts his head as Sepala approaches, ears forward, eyes bright. He is not the largest in the yard, not anymore. His muzzle carries threads of white that were not there in the early days. But when he rises, his posture is the same as it has always been. Steady, alert, ready. Sepala crouches, his mittened hand resting against the thick fur at Togo's neck. The dog leans into the touch. They have run together for more than a decade now, over mountains, across frozen seas, through storms so fierce the air itself seemed to vanish. In that time, Sepala has learned what true leadership looks like. It is not found in the loudest bark or the strongest pull. It is in the dog who keeps moving when the others falter, who finds the trail when the wind has erased it, who can carry the weight of the team's trust as surely as the sled carries its load. Togo has done all this and more. There have been times when the line between survival and disaster was as thin as the ice beneath their paws. Sepala remembers Norton Sound, a vast, frozen sheet of Bering Sea that groans and shifts beneath the weight of the sled. The horizon had vanished into white, the wind driving snow so hard it stung like sand. The ice was moving, drifting away from the shore in great unseen slabs. Most dogs would have hesitated, confused by the shifting underfoot. But Togo had lowered his head and pressed on, reading the subtle tremors in the ice, sensing the way to safety without a single word spoken. When they reached the far shore, Sepala had known, beyond all doubt, that this was no ordinary dog. Now, that same instinct is needed again. The Serum Run will demand everything from both of them. The distance they will cover is longer than any other team's share of the relay. From Nome, they will set out east to meet the medicine halfway, running into the heart of the storm before turning back with the cure. Sepala runs his hands over the sled, checking the lashings, the runners, the lines. He is a man who trusts in preparation, but he knows that no amount of readiness can control the wild. The trail will give what it gives, and take what it takes. That is the bargain every musher makes. In the harness rack, each set of lines is coiled neatly, ready for the dogs to step in. The lead position, the place at the very front, where the team's pace and direction are set, is reserved without question. There are other good dogs in Sepala's yard. Some are faster, some stronger, but none have the mind for it like Togo. He recalls the early years when Togo was still proving himself. How in storms, the dog seemed to understand not just the commands shouted over the wind, but the meaning behind them. How he would choose a path around a drift that saved the team minutes or hours. How, when the others lagged, Togo's pull on the gangline would tighten, urging them forward with a force that was more than muscle. Now, as the town of Nome waits in tense stillness, Sepola sees those same qualities in the way Togo stands. Weight balanced, eyes fixed toward the east, ears twitching at sounds too distant for human hearing. The dog seems to know something is coming. Snow falls lightly as the harnesses are laid out. One by one, the dogs are brought forward, each slipping into place with practiced ease. Togo steps into the lead harness without resistance, his movements calm but deliberate. This is where he belongs. At the point where the team meets the unknown, Sepola takes a moment, gloved hand resting briefly on the dog's shoulder. There is no speech, no ceremony, just the quiet recognition between two who have travelled too many miles together to need words. When the sled is ready, Sepola lifts his gaze to the pale band of horizon. Somewhere beyond it, the first musher has already left Nenana with the serum. The relay is in motion. Soon, the precious burden will be in Sepola's hands, and from there, it will be Togo's trail to lead. The dogs shift in the traces, sensing the anticipation. The sound of their breathing rises in the still air, steady and warm. Sepola steps onto the runners, the handlebar solid beneath his grip. The world beyond Nome waits. A world of frozen rivers, shadowed forests, and the endless wind. He knows the miles ahead will test them in ways even they cannot yet imagine. But he also knows this: when the trail disappears, when the snow blinds and the ice shifts, there is no one he would rather have at the front of his team than the small, unshakable dog named Togo. For in the wilderness, there are many who can follow a path, but only a few who can make one, and in that, Togo is a leader nobody could replace. As Sepola looks eastward, the first stars begin to prick the sky. Somewhere out there, the serum moves toward them, and soon, man and dog will run to meet it, side by side against the storm. The wind in Nenana tastes of iron and pine, sharp in the lungs, as if the air itself has been honed to a blade. The sky is a deep, unbroken darkness, the kind that swallows sound and sight alike. A single lamp burns outside the railroad depot, casting a golden halo that seems too small for the weight of the moment. Inside, the station master's hands tremble as he receives the small parcel. It is barely heavier than a child's toy, but the men in the room look at it as though it were the most precious thing in the world. Inside the narrow metal container is the serum. 20 pounds of life, sealed against the killing cold. It will not survive the delay of a single day. Neither will the children waiting in Nome. The first musher stands ready, his dogs restless in the shadows. Bill Shannon, a man whose face has been carved by the same winter that now tests him, knows what lies ahead. The river ice will be treacherous. The wind will strip heat from his body, and the night will try to steal his way. But he also knows that the waiting cannot last a moment longer. The station door opens, and the night pours in, black and glittering. The cylinder is placed in his sled as gently as if laying a child in a cradle. A single nod is given, no speeches, no ceremony, and then the whip cracks softly in the air. The dogs surge forward. Runners sing against the snow. The chain has begun. Bill's breath feathers the air before him as he leans into the sled. The trail is hard-packed in places, in others softened by drifts. His lead dogs know the route along the frozen Tanana River, their bodies flowing like a single organism, muscles and minds attuned to the path ahead. The night is alive with the rhythm of paws on snow, the faint hiss of the runners, and the distant groan of shifting ice beneath their weight. He does not think of the miles yet to come. He thinks only of the next bend in the river, the next stretch of open ice, the next rise of the land where the snow may be thinner. Behind him, the lights of Nanana vanish, swallowed by the dark. Ahead, there is nothing but the faintest glimmer of stars. The Serum rides nestled in blankets shielded from the wind. Bill imagines it breathing, as if it were a living thing, fragile yet fierce. He knows each man who will follow him in this relay will guard it with the same instinct. By the time he reaches Talavana, frost has crystallized on his parka, turning him into a figure cut from ice. His face burns with cold, his dog's fur is rimmed with frost. And yet, when he hands off the serum to the next musher, there is no pause, no hesitation. The exchange is as swift as a breath drawn in and released. The second team is already pulling away before Bill can even stretch his fingers. The relay moves like this, a sequence of men and dogs bound together not by rope, but by urgency. Each takes the baton for as far as strength and time will allow. Each leaves the warmth of shelter to meet the open cold with unflinching resolve. Down the Tanana, over frozen rivers, and through forests where the wind threads between bare branches, the teams run. Lantern light glints on the harness rings. Snow kicks up behind them, catching what little light the stars offer. Somewhere far to the west, the disease spreads like shadow through Nome's narrow streets. The thought of it urges each man to push harder, to shave minutes from the night. And yet the land is not easily crossed. In the dark, river ice can crack like a pistol shot, opening to water beneath. Sudden gusts can flatten a man to his knees. At times, the trail is nothing more than a suggestion under a blanket of fresh snow. The mushers trust their lead dogs, trust their instincts to find a safe path where human eyes cannot. It is not one man's race. It is not even one night's race. The relay is a living thread stitched across hundreds of miles, passing from one heartbeat to another. A handoff in a small cabin by lantern light. A nod in the dark. A runner's first push back into the wind. By the second night, the serum has already passed through hands blistered from rope and eyes red from wind. And yet, there is no slack in the chain. The route bends northward now, winding toward the place where Leonhard Seppel awaits. And with him, Togo, the old leader who has never yet turned from a challenge. Every musher who has touched the serum understands. This is not just freight. It is a thread binding lives together. The living, the ill, the unborn. And that thread must not be broken. The land lies silent, but not still. Snow drifts over the trail after each passage. The wind reshapes the ridges. By the time one team passes through, the marks of the last are nearly gone, as if the night itself is trying to erase the journey. But the next musher always arrives. And then the next. In villages along the road, dogs bark. At the sound of approaching sleds, children wake to watch through frost-ringed windows, and men gather at the edge of the trail with lanterns. They know that each team is carrying more than medicine. They carry a proof that even in the coldest of winters, strangers will run through the night for people they may never meet. As the relay nears Sepala's handoff, the temperature drops further. The ice underfoot groans more often now, and the wind carries a sharp, bitter edge. Yet there is also a kind of clarity in the air, as if the whole of Alaska holds its breath, listening for the sound of runners on snow. When the last man before Sepala approaches, his eyes are rimmed with frost, his hands stiff. The serum has travelled miles no train or ship could have covered in such time. It is passed once again with a quiet word, and a new leader takes it forward. The relay is not finished. It has only just reached its most dangerous stretch. Far ahead, the ice fields wait, brittle and shifting under the pull of the sea, and there, in the gathering cold, an old dog lifts his head, ready to run into the place where only the surest hearts dare to lead. The cylinder is passed from one gloved hand to another. There is no ceremony, no pause for words. Only a nod, a tightening of harness straps, the brief flash of steam as breath meets air. And then, the sound of runners cutting through snow once again. Each handoff is a thread in a chain, woven across Alaska's frozen heart. The cure is not carried by one man, nor by one team, but by many, each taking the weight for as long as their strength allows. In this way, the serum inches forward. As the hours bend and break beneath the cold, the land is an ocean of white. It is a place without clocks. The light, when it comes, is thin and slow, spilling across the horizon as if reluctant to touch the ice. And when it leaves, the darkness presses close, its silence broken only by the panting of dogs and the creak of leather straps. Forests close in around the trail, black pines bowed under thick armor of frost. Branches groan as the wind slips between them, scattering fine powder that hangs in the air like ghost breath. The dogs run in two neat lines, their paws striking a rhythm older than the town they run toward. Somewhere beneath the ice, a river waits for spring, its voice stilled by the season. Mushers know this rhythm well. The lean forward at the first tug of the lead dog, the shift of weight when the sled rounds a bend, the quiet prayers breathed into scarves when the snow deepens and the wind cuts. They have no audience here, no cheering crowd. Their reward is only the knowledge that the next team waits in the next village, and that the people in Nome, hundreds of miles away, do not yet know their lives are being measured in paw prints. The trail moves west. In the lowlands, the snow lies soft like sifted flour, slowing every step. In the high passes, the wind scours it away, leaving the earth bare and sharp. There is no part of this land that forgives easily. Every mile taken is a mile earned in sweat, in frostbite, in the aching swell of lungs that drink air colder than ice. One team arrives at a cabin on the edge of a frozen river. Light spills from the doorway, yellow and small against the vast dark. Inside, another musher waits, boots already on, gloves already pulled tight. The exchange takes less than a minute. A quick look into each other's eyes. A flicker of understanding passing silently between them. Then the sled is gone again, swallowed by the white expanse. The hours bend. Night is not truly night here, only a darker shade of twilight. Day is not truly day, only a dim glow that lingers briefly before slipping away. Men lose track of time, but not of distance. Every musher knows his part of the trail by heart. Where the ice is thin, where the drifts can bury a sled to the runner, bars, where the wind lifts snow into shimmering veils that hide the way ahead, and the mountains, they rise slowly, like something remembering its own height. Their shoulders are wrapped in snow, their breath drifts down as powder. It is here that the dogs labor hardest, their bodies bending low, claws scraping against the packed trail. Mushers lean forward, one foot on the sled, one pushing against the ground, their own breath joining the sharp bursts of the team. The Serum rides at the front of the sled, sealed in its cylinder, wrapped in blankets. It is light to the hands, yet heavier than any load carried across these trails before. Inside it, the promise of life, the fragile answer to a sickness that tightens its grip with every passing hour. To spill it, to lose it, would be to lose the race before the finish is even seen. In some places, the trail skirts frozen rivers. The ice groans under the sled, long, aching notes that echo into the stillness. The dogs do not falter. They know the ice will hold, but not forever. Every musher feels that warning in his bones and urges the team onward. Villages come and go, small clusters of cabins with smoke curling from chimneys. Here, people step outside to watch the passing sleds. They do not call out. Their voices would be lost in the wind, but their eyes follow until the runners vanish around the bend, knowing that somewhere down this chain, the cure will come for them too, if ever they need it. Some teams ride under starlight so bright it turns the snow silver. Others move beneath clouds that sag low, pressing the world into shadow. In both, the work is the same. Mile after mile, stride after stride. The dogs run, and the world slides past in a steady, white blur. The relay is more than movement, it is memory in the making. Years from now, some will recall the sound of a sled approaching in the night, the way the snow glittered in lantern light, the brief sight of a musher's face wrapped against the wind, eyes fixed on the path ahead. These are not moments that will be written into grand speeches or carved into stone, yet they are the beating heart of the story. At last, the miles remaining to the next handoff grow short. The musher can see the faint glow of a cabin window ahead. The dogs feel it too. Their pace quickens, their ears prick forward. The wind carries the faint scent of wood smoke. In a moment, the sled will stop, the cylinder will pass to the next hands, and another team will vanish into the endless white. And so it goes, team after team, village after village, a line of motion across a land that has known stillness for months. The cure moves west. Nome waits, not knowing the shape of the storm running toward it. Beyond the next ridge, another musher waits, and somewhere far ahead, in the deepening cold, a man named Sapola readies his team for the longest run of all. The lamps in Nome burn low, their glow soft against the snow-pressed windows. Inside, people move quietly, speaking in hushed tones, as though loud voices might stir the sickness that hangs over the town. But outside, in the thin light of morning, a different sound fills the air. The shuffle of boots, the creak of sled runners, the impatient bark of dogs. Leonhard Sepola stands with gloved hands tucked deep into his coat. His face is marked by years of cold, a skin weathered not by time alone, but by wind, snow, and the glare of endless white horizons. He does not wait for instructions. He has heard enough to understand. The serum is coming by relay from Nanana, but Nome cannot afford to wait until it arrives. If the disease gains ground before the cure appears, it will claim too many, and so he will go east, meet the relay somewhere along the trail, and turn back with the serum in hand. It is a plan that doubles the miles and doubles the risk, but in a place like this, the measure of distance is never the same as the measure of time. Here, the longer you wait, the more the road closes behind you. The dogs sense the change before the command is given. They shift in their harnesses, pawing at the snow, ears twitching toward the trail. Togo stands at the lead, his coat ruffled by the wind, eyes sharp and bright. He is smaller than some of the team, but his stance is unshakable. He knows the weight of the miles ahead, though not the number. In the rhythm of his breath, there is already movement. The air holds a promise of weather turning, that brittle stillness that settles over the land just before the wind decides to rise. Sepola feels it in the fine snow drifting at his feet, in the low tone of the sky. He has run in worse, but he also knows storms do not care for experience. With a short call, the lines snap taut. The sled lurches forward, the snow beneath the runners singing a quiet hiss. They leave the town behind quickly, the houses shrinking into the whiteness, until there is no sign of Nome at all, only the unbroken sweep of frozen land ahead. The trail east is familiar to Sepola, worn into memory by years of travel. He knows where the drifts will be deepest, where the ice on the rivers will be sound, and where it will give beneath the wrong step. But this run is different. The miles are not simply for freight or mail. They are for lives, each stride of the dogs drawing the cure closer to the hands that wait for it. The sun rides low, a pale disk that does not warm but marks the hours. Shadows stretch long across the snow, though there is little to cast them. The dog's breath rises in bursts of steam, vanishing quickly into the cold. Every muscle in their bodies works in quiet synchrony, the lines between them taut as bowstrings, the sled cutting a clean path behind. Togo leads without hesitation. He takes the curves with precision, slows when the ice beneath them groans, and pulls harder when the wind sweeps in from the side, trying to shove them off course. Sepola speaks to him in low words, not commands but reminders, the kind that pass between those who have run too many miles together to need more. By midday, the air begins to shift. Clouds gather low over the mountains, their edges torn by the wind. Snow falls in thin, dry flakes that sting the skin, the kind of snow that rides the air sideways, carried by currents invisible until they strike your face. It is the beginning of the storm he felt in the morning, not yet at full strength, but already moving to close the sky. Still, they press on. The sound of the sled runners becomes part of the wind, and the world narrows to the space just ahead of Togo's paws. Sepola keeps his weight balanced, leaning into the turns, his mind measuring the day not in hours, but in the ground gained before nightfall. When darkness comes, it does not rush in. It seeps into the edges of vision, blurring the lines between snow and sky. The dogs slow only slightly, their pace steady as the stars begin to emerge, glittering faintly through breaks in the cloud cover. Sepola knows they must keep moving while the trail still speaks clearly beneath them. In the white of the storm's heart, there will be no trail at all. The cold deepens. Every breath feels edged with glass. Every pause to adjust a strap or shift weight is an invitation for frost to claim the skin. Yet there is no thought of stopping. The miles east are not yet enough. The relay still lies somewhere ahead. Hours pass, or perhaps it is a single, unbroken hour stretched thin. The land begins to rise, the first slopes of the interior pulling against the sled. The dogs dig in, shoulders rippling under their coats, and Togo climbs without falter, his body a line of motion that pulls the team with him. At last, Sepola gives the call to rest. The sled stops in a shallow shelter of rock, where the wind breaks slightly. The dogs drop to the snow, chests heaving, steam rising from their coats. Sepola moves among them, checking lines, running his hands over their legs, speaking each name softly into the wind. Togo stands for a moment longer, head lifted toward the trail ahead, as if unwilling to give the storm even a single lead. They will not rest long. The relay is moving toward them even now, and the sooner they meet it, the sooner they can turn back toward Nome. But in this moment, with the snow whispering against the sled and the wind carrying the far-off echo of ice, the world feels held between breaths, waiting for the next stride. Far to the east, a cylinder of life rides toward them through the dark, and when it reaches Sepola's hands, the longest and fiercest miles will begin. The sea is not meant to be walked upon. Even in the deep freeze of winter, the ice remembers the water beneath it, restless and alive. Norton Sound stretches before them like a sheet of hammered glass, pocked with drifts, lined with cracks. It is the most direct route east, a flat, white highway across miles of ocean. But it is also a place where storms gather with a swiftness that erases all escape. Sepola knows this. He has crossed here before, in other winters with calmer skies. But as he steps onto the sea ice, the wind lifts, sharp and sudden, rattling the harness rings and tugging at the sled as if it too wants to turn back. Above, the sky begins to shift, a heavy, rolling grey that swallows the pale disk of the sun. Togo does not wait for the wind to settle. He moves forward, nose low, reading the faint rises and dips that mark safe passage. To the untrained eye, the surface is the same in all directions. But Togo feels where the ice is thick, where it thins to a dangerous brittleness. His paws land in places Sepola cannot see, as if he follows a thread laid down long before. The first gusts come sideways, driving a spray of loose snow across the ice. It stings the skin, buries the trail behind them, and paints the air in shifting veils. The sound here is different than on land. Not the muted whisper of snow over earth, but the low, hollow groan of the sea's frozen skin flexing under weight. It rises in long notes beneath the dogs, a sound that works its way into the spine. The team runs in a tight formation, ears pinned back against the wind. Their bodies move as one, the lines between them drawn taut by trust in the lead. Sepola leans forward on the sled, eyes narrowed against the snow that cuts sideways into his vision. He cannot see the far shore. It has already disappeared into the storm. The only world left to him is the small moving circle of ice directly ahead, lit by the faint white glow that filters through the clouds. The storm builds quickly. Wind roars now, a steady, unbroken force that bends the dog's fur flat and pulls at Sepola's parka. Snow wells up from the surface, hiding the runners, hiding the paws. The sled moves forward into nothingness, the edges of sight dissolving. This is the kind of whiteout where a man could walk in a circle for hours, never knowing he had left his trail until the ice beneath him gave way. Togo's pace does not falter. His head dips into the wind, his body angling to cut through the invisible wall. Every few moments, he adjusts the team's path, a slight veer left or right that avoids the thin ice he senses ahead. Sepola feels each shift in the sled's pull and knows to trust it without question. There is no room here for doubt. If the lead dog turns, you follow. If he slows, you prepare for danger. And if he runs straight into the wind, you lean in, because there is no other compass in this kind of storm. The hours stretch. The sound of the wind becomes a constant roar in the ears, so loud that Sepola cannot hear his own voice when he calls to the team. The cold digs deep, not only into the hands and face, but into the chest, a chill that rides the breath and settles into the lungs. Still, the dogs run, their paws thudding into the ice in a rhythm steady enough to be felt through the sled. Once, a sharp crack splits the air. The ice shudders beneath them, a tremor that runs the length of the team. For a heartbeat, all motion halts. The dogs freezing mid-stride, ears pricked forward. Togo's head turns, reading the sound, and then, without hesitation, he angles sharply left, leading them toward thicker ice. The sled tilts, the runners scraping over ridges, and the team bursts forward again, as if chased by the memory of that sound. Sepola knows the danger has not passed. Cracks in Norton Sound can spread unseen, spidering under the snow until they open wide enough to swallow a sled whole. The safest choice is speed, to keep moving until land is under them once more. The world narrows to a tunnel of white. Snow drives into Sepola's face, coating his lashes until he blinks through a blur. The dogs are little more than shadows against the storm, but Togo's shape remains distinct, his head low, his gait strong. He moves not with the desperation of flight, but with the precision of a pathfinder who knows that every step is one closer to safety. Somewhere ahead, the edge of the sea waits. Sepola imagines it as a dark line where the frozen ocean yields to the solidity of land. But until it appears, there is only this: the breath of the dogs rising and vanishing in the air, the creak of the sled, and the deep, ancient voice of the ice beneath. Hours into the crossing, the wind shifts again. It comes now from behind, pushing them forward, though it brings with it an even denser wall of snow. Sepola can see no more than a few feet ahead, but he feels the subtle lift in the team's speed, the sense that they know the far shore is near. Then, a rise under the runners, the faint change in sound from hollow to solid. The dogs surge forward, the ice giving way to drifted snow over frozen earth. The groan of the sea falls behind them, replaced by the muffled hush of land. They have crossed Norton Sound. Sepola eases the team to a halt in the shelter of a low bluff. He moves quickly down the line, checking harnesses, rubbing frost from the dogs' coats. Togo stands at the front, his sides heaving, but his eyes bright. Snow clings to his muzzle, the ice of the storm still caught in his fur. Sepola rests a hand on his neck, feeling the steady beat of muscle and breath beneath. No map could have brought them here. Only this lead dog's unerring sense, forged in years of snow and storms. The wind still howls beyond the bluff, but here for a moment there is quiet enough to breathe. They have miles yet to run before the relay finds them. But this crossing, this gamble over a moving sea, is behind them. Far inland, the storm still hunts their path, and ahead, the relay races toward the meeting point where Togo will take the Serum into his keeping. The morning begins without sunlight. The world is a dim, pale shadow, clouds pressing low, the air brittle and sharp. Sepola does not need the sun to see the way. His eyes know this land as one knows the face of an old friend. The frozen coastline, the river valleys, the mountain passes, each is etched into his memory by years of travel. Yet today, the trail feels longer, heavier, as though it stretches not just across miles but through time itself. Togo stands ready, muscles taut beneath his thick coat, his breath steaming in the air. He is lean, older than the other dogs, But his strength is not measured in youth. It is written in endurance. He has led Sepola through blizzards, over mountains, across treacherous ice fields, but never like this, never with so much resting on their speed. The team surges forward, the runners of the sled whispering against the packed snow. Their pace is quick, eager, the sound of paws beating in rhythm with the sled's glide. The wind rushes past, carrying the faint scent of salt from the sea and the distant echo of creaking ice. In the first miles, the rhythm feels almost gentle, a steady pull, the soft hiss of snow beneath them. But Sepola knows this is only the beginning. The distance ahead will strip away comfort, leaving only will and instinct. They climb through low hills, the trail weaving between stands of spruce and bare, frost-bitten willow. Snow clings to the branches, catching the dim light like dusted silver. The dogs' breaths come in bursts of white, each exhale a small cloud that quickly disappears into the wind. By midday, the land opens into the wide expanse of the coast. The sea lies frozen, an unbroken sheet of ice stretching to the horizon. It is here that speed matters most. The open ice allows for longer, faster running. But it is also here that danger waits unseen. The ice can shift, crack, or give way entirely, hiding currents and black water beneath. Sepola trusts Togo's senses more than his own eyes. The lead dog's ears flick, his pace adjusts almost imperceptibly, steering the team away from danger that lies invisible beneath the snow. They move like a single organism, the lines between man and dogs blurred into one will, one direction, one breath. The miles fold behind them, but the weight of the journey grows heavier. The air cuts deeper into their lungs. The muscles in the dog's legs begin to burn. Sepola speaks to them in a low voice, the same voice he has always used. Not commanding, but encouraging, as if reminding them they are not alone. Night falls while they are still far from rest. The sky deepens into a blue so dark it seems almost black, the stars sharp and cold above them. They stop only long enough for a quick meal, meat frozen hard as stone, thawed just enough for the dogs to tear at. Sepola eats little. His body moves automatically through the motions of care, checking harnesses, adjusting the sled, speaking to Togo in the dark. Then they are running again. The second day is harder. Snow begins to fall, fine at first, then heavier, until the world narrows to a small tunnel of white ahead of the sled. The wind rises, pushing against them, as though the land itself is resisting their passage. The dogs lean into the harnesses, their paws punching through drifts, their breaths growing harsher. Sepola feels the weight of each hour. The cure lies ahead, but so does the storm, and both race toward them with equal urgency. He knows there is no choice but forward. They cross the frozen Norton Sound again, this time under a sky that howls. The ice groans and shifts beneath them, a sound that cuts through even the roar of the wind. Togo's head lowers, his eyes fixed on the far shore. The lead dog moves with precision, weaving a safe path, his body reading the ice as one reads a familiar language. By the third day, exhaustion creeps in like frost. The dog's gaits grow heavier, the once snapping lines now sagging slightly between pulls. Sepola feels the same weight in his own limbs, the dull ache in his back and shoulders from leaning into the sled's sway. Yet each time his gaze drifts forward, he sees Togo's steady pace. Not the frantic dash of a young dog, but the relentless drive of one who understands the distance still to go. They pass through small, snow-buried villages, the windows shuttered against the cold. Sometimes a figure emerges, bundled against the wind, raising a hand in silent greeting or in quiet awe. Word has spread of the relay. People know this team is carrying the hope of Nome in their wake. The final miles of the fourth day blur into a haze of movement and cold. Sepola has long since stopped thinking in terms of hours or distance. There is only the next stretch of trail, the next rise, the next turn in the river. His mind moves in rhythm with the sled, with the sound of paws striking snow. When at last they reach the handoff point, the world seems to exhale. The sled slows, the dogs pant heavily, their breaths deep and ragged. Sepola kneels beside Togo, pressing his gloved hand into the thick fur of the lead dog's neck. Words feel too small for what this animal has done, for the miles he has carried them, for the steadiness that never once faltered. The serum is passed to the next musher, and for a brief moment, the urgency eases. The trail behind them is a long, silent ribbon disappearing into the white distance. But Sepola knows that the journey is not truly over. For the relay to succeed, others must carry what they have carried, through the same storms and the same cold. He looks at Togo, who stands still at the head of the line, eyes bright despite the miles. The dog's breath rises into the wind, vanishing almost as soon as it appears, like the fleeting moments of triumph before the next challenge begins. As they turn back toward Nome, retracing the path they carved through ice and wind, Sepola wonders how many more hearts will beat against the cold before the cure finally arrives. And whether courage, like a flame in winter, can survive the miles still ahead. The world is white, not the gentle white of drifting flakes, but a fierce, blinding sweep that devours the horizon. The wind does not whistle. It howls, as if trying to drive men and dogs back into the darkness they came from. Snow stings the skin, finds its way into every seam of clothing, clings to the fur of the dogs until they look like statues carved from ice. Leonhard Sepola leans forward on the runners, squinting against the swirl. Somewhere ahead, through this moving wall of snow, another musher waits. That man carries the serum, the small, fragile weight that Nome depends on. The dogs know something is different. Togo, at the lead, moves with an energy. There's not just the pull of harness and habit. His ears are flattened against the wind, but his eyes are fixed forward. He senses the nearness of the meeting, though he cannot know the human stakes. Still, he runs as if he does. It has been days since Sepola left Nome, heading east. While others wait for the relay to reach them, he chose to meet it halfway, covering far more ground than most will. That choice means he has crossed ice that creaked under paw and claw, skirted mountains where avalanches whispered threats from above, and now faces a blizzard that swallows the trail faster than it can be followed. Then, a shadow in the snow. Another team appears, dogs hunched low, their driver bent like a figure carved from driftwood. The two sleds draw close, slowing until they are barely moving. Snow crusts their eyelashes, masks their expressions. No words are shouted. The wind would tear them away. But there is a nod, a gloved hand reaching into a sled, and the small metal cylinder is passed. It is lighter than Sepola expects, absurdly so for the weight of its meaning. Inside are vials of antitoxin, swaddled in layers to keep the glass from shattering in the cold. In another place, it might be mistaken for a lunch tin. Here, it is the most precious cargo in Alaska. The exchange lasts less than a minute. There is no time to linger. Cold steals strength faster than hunger. The other musher turns eastward, disappearing into the white. Sepola shifts his weight, feels the sled respond, and the team swings west. Now they face the wind head-on. The return is harder. Before, the storm had been at their backs, shoving them forward. Now it is an unyielding wall. Each breath burns. Sepola's beard is stiff with ice, his hands numb despite layers of wool and fur. The dogs lower their heads, pushing against the gusts as if climbing an invisible hill. Togo leads without falter. The storm does not confuse him. Where another dog might veer, blinded, he holds the line with the memory of the trail in his mind. His paws press into snow that shifts and slides, but his body remains steady, reading the wind and the earth beneath it. Hours blur. Sepola's thoughts narrow to essentials. The team's rhythm, the harness lines, the precious weight in the sled. He cannot think about the sick children in Nome, their shallow breaths, the way parents must be watching over them in darkened rooms. That picture would be too heavy to carry on top of the miles. Instead, he thinks of the next bend, the next stretch of ice, the next breath. The world is reduced to two colors: white snow, black shadows. Occasionally, a ridge of ice looms like the spine of some frozen beast, and they must climb over or weave around it. The sled's runners hiss on packed snow, scrape on ice. Sometimes the noise is swallowed instantly by the wind. Sometimes it echoes strangely, as if the storm itself is listening. Sepola calls to the dogs. Short, clipped sounds, just enough to keep them together. His voice is hoarse, but it carries a note they recognize. They answer in their own way. Not with noise, but by leaning into the traces, hauling with every ounce they have left. Night comes without darkness. The blizzard makes its own ceiling, its own light. The sky and ground are the same pale shade, and there is no clear horizon. It is a place where time dissolves. The minutes could be hours, the hours could be minutes. Only the ache in muscles and the frost on faces marks the passage. When they pause for a brief rest, the dogs curl against the snow, their bodies making shallow hollows that shield them from the wind. Sepola kneels by Togo, brushing ice from the fur around his muzzle. The dog's breath rises in quick, sharp clouds. His eyes are bright, but they flicker toward the west, toward Nome, as if urging the man to rise and move on. They do, because there is no choice. Somewhere behind them, the storm covers their trail, erasing their passage. Somewhere ahead, Nome waits in silence, not yet knowing the handoff has been made. Between those 2 points lies only the storm, and the will to cross it. By the time the wind begins to ease, Sepola can feel the difference in the dog's pull. They know they are gaining ground. He lifts his gaze, and through the blur, the faint outline of the next landmark takes shape. The worst of the blizzard is passing, but the journey is far from done. The mountains wait, cold and unmoving, their pass is heavy with snow. And the Serum must reach beyond them. The storm loosens its grip, but ahead the mountains rise. Dark gates between Nome and the cure it needs. Tomorrow the trail will climb, and the snow will fall again. The storm thins as they reach the base of the mountains, but the air remains heavy, the sky pale and watchful. The sea ice is behind them now, replaced by the rising spines of the land. Ridges layered in snow, their faces scarred by wind. These are not welcoming slopes. They do not offer a path, they tolerate one. The trail bends between cliffs that loom like frozen sentinels. The light is muted here, caught between stone and snow. It is a place where sound changes. The wind becomes a whispering presence. The crunch of paws and runners echoes against the walls, and even the breath of the dogs feels louder, as though the mountains themselves are listening. Togo leads without hesitation. His gait is steady, his head low, his eyes scanning the white track ahead. He has crossed mountains before, in storms, in darkness, with hunger pressing at his ribs, but never with such a burden behind him. Sepola feels the difference in his lead dog. There is no wasted motion, no glance back. Togo pulls, as though each step is stitched to the beating of a distant heart. The snow underfoot is deceptive. In places, it is a thin crust over hidden hollows. In others, it slides in loose sheets, threatening to carry paws and sled toward the drop below. The team moves in a tight line, following the trail as it clings to the mountain's shoulder. To the left, the slope rises into rock and ice. To the right, it falls away into shadow, the kind of shadow that swallows everything but the wind. Sepola's eyes shift constantly between the dogs, the traces, and the mountainside above. Avalanches can start with a sound no louder than a sigh. Sometimes they start without sound at all. He knows these slopes can betray the quiet, turning stillness into a rushing wall that erases everything in its path. Togo chooses the line with instinct honed over years, never hugging the slope too close, never straying toward the edge. His paws are bleeding now, though he shows no limp. The ice cuts, the cold burns, but his body is a map of endurance. Each scar and callus a record of miles conquered. They climb higher. The air grows thinner, the cold sharper. Sepola leans into the sled, helping on the steepest pitches, feeling the strain in his own muscles. The runners scrape on hidden rock, sending vibrations through his arms. The dog's breaths puff out in steady rhythm, a pulse against the silence. Above them, clouds catch on the peaks, dragging shadows down the slopes. The trail narrows to the width of the sled, hemmed in by rock. Here, Sepola knows, a wrong step is not a stumble. It is an ending. He calls softly to Togo, his voice a low thread in the air. The lead dog responds with a slight increase in pace, as if understanding that in narrow places, the best thing is to keep moving. Now and then, the wind rises, funneled through the gaps between ridges. It carries flakes of ice that sting the skin and blind the eyes. Sepola keeps his head down, trusting Togo to guide the team until the gust passes. In the moments after, the world feels unnaturally still, as though holding its breath. They cross a ridge where the snow is wind-scarred, the surface rippled like water frozen mid-current. From here, Sepola can see the next range ahead. Its pass is half hidden in cloud. The distance is not great on a map, but in this land, distance is measured in effort, not miles. Between them and that next ridge lie valleys where the snow drifts deep enough to swallow a sled, and slopes where a single slip can undo hours of climbing. As they descend into the first valley, the light fades, not from sunset, though the day is aging, but from the sheer height of the mountains around them. Here, the sun only visits briefly each day, and even then, its warmth does not reach the ground. Shadows stretch across the snow like the bars of a cold prison. The descent is as dangerous as the climb. The sled wants to overtake the dogs, to slide faster than their paws can grip. Sepola braces, dragging one runner to slow their pace, but the slope is steep and the snow loose. The team feels the pull and leans into their traces, holding the weight back. At the bottom, they pause, steam rising from their bodies into the frigid air. Sepola kneels again beside Togo, checking the raw pads of his paws. Tiny beads of blood stain the snow. He has ointment, but no time to linger, and he knows Togo would not take it if it meant delay. The dog's gaze is fixed ahead, ears twitching at sounds only he hears. The climb begins again. This slope is less steep but longer, a steady pull that tests endurance more than strength. Sepola falls into the rhythm of the trail. Step, breath, step, breath. The world reduced to motion and necessity. He remembers other journeys, other climbs, but none with this weight in the sled. It is strange how something so small can feel heavier than all the gear he has ever hauled. Near the next ridge, the wind returns, colder now, as if drawn from the heart of the mountains themselves. It carries with it a fine mist of snow that swirls in ghostly shapes before settling back to the ground. The dogs push through it, their bodies bending into the gusts. When they crest the ridge, the view is brief but staggering, a sweep of white valleys and dark peaks, the trail winding like a thread through the folds of the land. Somewhere beyond that horizon lies Golovin, and beyond Golovin, Nome. The Serum's journey is far from over, but Sepola feels the pull of the west now, a subtle shift in the weight of the miles. The descent into the final valley of the range is calmer, the snow packed and even. Here, the mountains seem to loosen their grip, allowing passage without protest. Sepola knows better than to think of them as conquered. They have merely been crossed. The team runs with renewed steadiness, the strain in their bodies balanced by the knowledge that the worst of the climbing is behind them. Togo's pace is unchanged, tireless, unyielding, the line between survival and failure drawn in each step he takes. By the time they reach the mouth of the valley, the first stars are appearing faint in the pale sky. The air feels different here, touched by the breath of the lowlands ahead. Behind them, the mountains stand in silence, their peaks fading into shadow. The high passes are behind them, but the trail ahead still wins through snow and darkness. In the distance lies Golovin, and with it, the final handoff that will carry the Serum the last miles toward Nome. The land changes beneath them. The jagged heights are behind now, replaced by rolling snowfields that tilt gently toward the coast. The air tastes of salt again, faint but distinct, carried inland by a wind that moves in long, even breaths. Sepola stands on the runners, knees bent, eyes fixed on the line of dogs. He can see the fatigue in their movements, the small dips of their heads, the tightening of their strides. But it is not defeat. It is the burn of a fire nearing its end, still bright but drawing from the last of its fuel. Togo's gait remains steady, though the crimson stains on the snow mark the toll the journey has taken. His paws are raw, each step pressing against ice and crusted snow. Yet he pulls with a constancy that seems carved into the marrow of his bones. The trail is his domain, and as long as there is a path ahead, he will follow it. The wind picks up as they descend toward a frozen inlet. The sea ice stretches in a dull white sheet, broken only by the dark cracks where the water breathes beneath. Crossing it is quicker than threading through mountain passes, but it demands the same focus. One misstep and the sled could be swallowed whole. Sepola trusts Togo's judgment. The lead dog skirts suspicious patches, angles toward the firmer snow that lies over thicker ice. The other dogs follow without hesitation, their bodies moving like a single living rope. The runners hiss across the surface, their sound mingling with the deep, distant groan of the sea under its frozen skin. On the far shore, The land rises again in low hills dotted with wind-sculpted drifts. The trail is marked only by the faintest of sled grooves, half filled by blowing snow. Sepola knows they are close to Golovin now. His mind counts the remaining miles in reverse, each one carrying them nearer to rest, but also to the moment when he will let go of the thing he has carried so far. The sky is a pale, unbroken grey. Time feels indistinct here, the light never truly growing brighter or dimmer, just shifting in tone, as if the day is holding itself open for as long as needed. When they crest the last rise before Golovin, the village lies ahead, a cluster of buildings huddled against the wind. Smoke rises from a few chimneys, drawn sideways by the breeze. It is not the sight of the place that catches Sepola's breath, but the knowledge that the Serum's journey is passing from his care to another's. The dogs feel the change in the air. Their pace quickens slightly, not in a burst, but in the way of animals sensing the nearness of food, warmth, and stillness. Togo's ears twitch back briefly, as though to listen for his musher's breath, then forward again, fixed on the narrow gap between the buildings where the trail enters the village. A figure appears ahead, a man standing beside a waiting sled team. Snow clings to his parka, his mittens, even the lashes of his eyes. This is Charlie Olsen, the next link in the chain. He has been waiting, ready, knowing that his turn will not be easier, only different. As they draw near, Sepola slows the team to a halt. The sudden silence is almost startling after the constant rhythm of the run. Dogs stand panting, their bodies steaming faintly in the cold air. Sepola reaches into the sled, his gloved hands closing around the small metal cylinder. For a moment, he holds it without moving, feeling its chill even through the leather. This is the weight of days and miles, of storms and ice, of every pull of Togo's harness, and yet it is also the weight of what still lies ahead. Miles yet to be run, dangers yet to be faced before Nome sees it. He steps forward, meeting Olsen's eyes. No words are wasted. The wind would take them anyway. The cylinder passes from one hand to another. It is a simple gesture, the kind that could happen anywhere with anything. But here, it is a turning point in the life of a town. Olsen nods, tucks the serum into his sled, and turns to his own team. The exchange is complete in moments. Soon, Olsen's dogs are moving, their paws striking the snow with fresh energy, carrying the serum west. Sepola stands watching until they disappear beyond the first rise. Only then does he turn back to his own team. Togo is still standing at the front, looking down the trail as though he might keep going if given the word. His breath clouds the air, his fur rimed with frost, his body trembling not from fear, but from the echo of movement. The way the trail leaves on in muscles, even after the sled has stopped. Sepola walks forward, kneels beside him, and rests a hand gently on the thick fur of his neck. There is no need for praise here. The bond between them is built on countless miles, countless moments when one trusted the other without question. Still, Sepola's voice is low and warm as he speaks Togo's name, a sound that is more gratitude than command. The run is over, not the Serum's journey, not the race against the sickness in Nome, but this part. Their part has ended. The relief is quiet, almost fragile. It carries no triumph, only the deep, steady satisfaction of having done what was needed. In the fading light, Sepola turns the team toward the place where they will rest. The trail lies behind them, a thread pulled through storm and silence, now woven into the larger fabric of the relay. Togo walks at the lead, still steady, still sure, as though guiding them home. The wind carries the sound of Olsen's team into the distance, each paw beat taking the serum closer to Nome. But in Golovin, Togo's name lingers in the air, a quiet echo of the miles he has conquered. Night has not ended, though the hours have passed. The blizzard erases time itself, folding the landscape into a single endless swirl of white. Gunnar Kazan can no longer see more than a few feet ahead. Yet the trail is still there, hidden beneath the snow, winding toward Nome, and at its head runs Balto. The dog's fur is coated in frost, his breath freezing against his muzzle. Each step breaks through a crust of ice that the storm laid down only moments before. But he does not slow. His paws, raw from days of running, press forward as though guided by something deeper than sight, an instinct sharpened by the harsh, untamed years of the Alaskan frontier. The sled runners scrape and hiss over the snow, the sound nearly lost beneath the roar of the wind. Kazan hunches low, his face lashed by frozen particles sharp as glass. He thinks of Nome, its small cluster of wooden buildings now buried in drifts, the schoolhouse that stands empty, the children lying feverish in their beds. The serum in his sled is more than medicine now. It is the thread between life and loss. Balto has never been the fastest dog in the kennel, nor the most celebrated. He was strong, steady, traits that mattered more to the man behind the sled than to the crowds who favoured champions of speed. Yet tonight, it is his steadiness that holds the line against the storm. The trail is invisible, the markers buried. Kazan, with hands numbed and eyes blinded by the gale, trusts the lead dog's memory. Balto has run this route before. In the pitch of night and storm, he is more certain than any compass. Hours pass, though the storm makes them feel endless. Each mile is a quiet battle, against the cold, against exhaustion, against the temptation to stop, just for a moment, to let the body rest. But rest would mean freezing where they stand. And so they keep moving. The team breathes in unison, their bodies swaying with the rhythm of the run. Somewhere behind them, the last musher in the chain waits, unsure if Kazan will press on or hand off the serum. The schedule says the relay will end at the next point, but the storm leaves no schedule intact. Kazan knows the truth. Stopping here would risk the serum freezing before it reached Nome. And so, without ceremony, without pause, he urges Balto on past the hand-off point. They will take the last leg themselves. The wind shifts, carrying with it the smell of the sea, a sign they are nearing the coast. The snow grows heavier, thicker, as if the storm is trying one last time to drive them back. Balto lowers his head further, tail straight, shoulders hunched against the gale. His gait never falters. The world has narrowed to the line of his path, and the weight of what he carries behind him. Kazan begins to see the faint outline of shapes in the white cluster of shadowed forms that rise from the snow like ghosts. Nome. The thought almost makes him laugh, but his face is too frozen for such an expression. He shouts encouragement to the dogs, though the words are whipped away before they reach their ears. In the sleeping town, a few lanterns still burn in windows. No one expects the serum to arrive in the depths of night. They think it will come with morning light, if it comes at all. The streets are empty, drifts climbing halfway up the doors. And then, faint at first, muffled by the storm, comes a sound. The bark of a lead dog, clear and sharp against the howl of the wind. One window lights, then another, as people rise from their beds and peer into the night. Shapes emerge in the swirling snow, the sled, the dogs, the man leaning forward over the runners. Balto stops before the makeshift hospital, his body trembling from exhaustion, but his eyes bright, alert. Kazan stumbles from the sled, pulling the wrapped package from its place. His hands shake, not from weakness but from the knowledge that this small bundle carries the survival of an entire town. Inside, the serum is passed to waiting hands, carried into the warmth where nurses prepare to begin the life-saving work. Outside, Kazan kneels beside Balto, pressing his forehead to the dog's frost-coated fur. There are no crowds, no photographers, only the sound of the wind and the steady breathing of the team. Yet in this quiet, history shifts. The storm will pass. The children will wake. Word will spread across the territory, then across the country, of the sled dog who led the final charge into Nome. Statues will be built, stories told, and a name, Balto, will find its way into the memory of generations. But tonight, there is only the silent victory of arrival. The trail is done. The dogs can rest. Kazan feels the weight of exhaustion press into his bones, but also the lighter weight of knowing they made it. In the wind's howl, he hears the fading echo of the journey behind them. The creak of sleds, the beat of paws, the voices of the men and dogs who carried hope across the frozen miles. And beneath it all, like the last note of a lullaby, the knowledge that in the heart of the storm it was trust. Between man and dog, between instinct and faith, that lit the way home. In the stillness after the storm, Balto closes his eyes, his breath steady at last. Yet beyond the town's quiet streets, the story is already moving on, toward the voices that will carry it into legend. Morning comes slowly to Nome. The pale Arctic light seeps into the sky like water into snow, barely touching the rooftops with silver. The air is still sharp with cold, but there is a difference now, a loosened thread in the fabric of fear. Somewhere, a door opens, and the sound of boots on the hard, packed street echoes without the urgency it held only days before. The serum has arrived. It sits now in the doctor's hands. A small cylinder, unremarkable in appearance, yet holding the weight of a town's survival. Glass vials, clear as frozen rain, are prepared with careful hands. The work is quiet, deliberate. There is no cheer in this room, only relief deep enough to still the body and dampen the voice. The patients, children and adults alike, receive the medicine, the bitterness on the tongue chased by the hope it carries. By evening, something shifts. In the sick rooms, the sound of strained breathing eases. The rasp of illness softens, replaced by the soft sighs of sleep. Mothers, who had kept vigil for nights on end, lean against bed frames, their own eyes closing for the first time in what feels like years. The lamplight in these rooms burns warmer, less like a ward against despair, and more like a promise of morning. Outside, the streets are almost empty. The blizzard has not yet loosened its grip, and snow drapes itself in thick folds across rooftops, fences, and sleds left leaning against the side of buildings. But through the white veil, figures move, slow, unhurried. They carry no messages, no urgent news, only themselves. A man pauses to speak with another, their breath mingling in the air, their words quiet. Nome rests. Not in the way of sleep that comes from weariness, but in the way a body rests after surviving a fever, every muscle aware of its own survival. The town is still an island of snow, cut off from the world, But now the ice feels less like a prison and more like a wall against whatever else winter might bring. In the corners of the town, sled dogs lie curled in the drifts, steam rising from their fur as they rest. They do not know the length of the trail they have ended, nor the measure of the lives they have touched. They sleep simply because they have run far enough, because the harness is gone, because the man's voice calling them forward is now telling them to stay. And yet, in certain homes, the memory of the past weeks will never fully fade. The parents who wrapped their children in blankets to keep out the cold and the illness still glance toward the door when the wind rises, as if expecting more bad news to be carried in. The shopkeepers who closed their shutters during the height of fear now keep them open a little longer each day, just to see the light come through. The children whose play was hushed begin to laugh again in the snow, their mittened hands shaping snowballs, their voices ringing like bells. News travels slowly here. For most, the only understanding of what has happened beyond the edges of town is what the doctor or the mayor might share when they pass through. There is no way for Nome to hear, just yet, how the outside world is speaking of them, of the men and dogs who crossed the wilderness to bring the cure. In the quiet of their relief, they do not know that their struggle is already becoming a story. At the harbour, the ice holds firm. The frozen sea lies in perfect stillness, an endless sheet of white that meets the horizon without a seam. Somewhere beyond that line, ships lie waiting for spring, for the thaw that will open the way to Nome again. Until then, the town will remain wrapped in its winter solitude, the same as it was before the sickness. But not unchanged, for in every home there is now a small, invisible space where fear once lived and where gratitude has taken root. It does not shout or demand to be seen. It simply lingers like the glow of embers in a hearth after the fire has gone low. As night falls, the lamps come on one by one, soft pools of light in the white darkness. The sound of the wind returns, not the howl of a storm, but the steady, rhythmic breath of winter. Inside, the people of Nome settle into their chairs, their beds, their moments of stillness. Somewhere, a mother hums a lullaby, her voice low so as not to wake the child sleeping beside her. The town sleeps again. Not everyone will remember the details. Time will soften the edges, blur the nights into one long stretch of winter. But for those who watched the storm approach and felt the clock run down, the memory will remain. The knowledge of how thin the line can be between life and loss, and how far hope sometimes must travel to reach them. The next morning, snow falls again, thick, heavy flakes that erase the footprints from the day before, that cover the sled tracks and the marks left by boots and paws alike. It is as though winter is smoothing over the record of what has passed, tucking the town back into its long sleep beneath the snow. But under that white blanket, life moves, slower now, but steady, and with the quiet resilience of those who have seen the storm's end. Beyond Nome, the trail still lies silent beneath the snow, holding the memory of every step and every breath that carried the cure. Soon, stories will begin to gather around those miles. Stories that will name heroes, remember faces, and, sometimes, forget others. It begins with a photograph. Gunnar Kazan stands beside his sled, the wind still frozen into the folds of his coat. At the front, Balto, ears forward, eyes steady, looks into the lens. The image travels faster than the dogs themselves ever could, printed in papers across America. In cities and towns far from Alaska's frozen coast, people who had never heard of Nome now speak of it over breakfast. The story condenses in the telling. It is easier to remember one dog, one musher, one final stretch into town. The headlines crown Balto the hero of the Serum Run, the dog who brought life to a dying village. His name becomes a symbol, his image a shorthand for courage and endurance. Soon, letters arrive, requests for appearances follow, and the journey from the snowbound streets of Nome to the polished halls of civic receptions begins. In New York, the air is nothing like the sharp, clean cold of Alaska. It smells of coal smoke and the faint tang of the harbor. Yet Balto walks through it with the same steady step he carried on the trail. Children reach out to touch him, their mittened hands brushing his fur. The mayor speaks of bravery, of the American spirit, and of how one dog became a champion for all. Behind him, draped in cloth, stands a bronze statue waiting to be unveiled. When the cloth falls, the likeness is set in metal forever. Balto, head high, eyes forward, muscles caught in the moment of running. The plaque reads, dedicated to the indomitable spirit of the Sled dogs that relayed antitoxin 600 miles over rough ice, across treacherous waters, through Arctic blizzards, from Nanana to the relief of stricken Nome in the winter of 1925. The words honor them all, but the figure is Balto's alone. Far from the noise of the city, Togo knows nothing of this. He lies in a quiet kennel in Alaska, his work done, his body carrying the deep ache of years on the trail. His fur is grizzled now, the sharpness of his youth softened by age. In the stillness, he dreams, not of applause, but of the endless white horizon. The sound of Sepala's voice, the strain of the harness pulling against his chest. Those who were there know the truth. That Togo's run was the longest, the hardest, the most dangerous. 260 miles over ice and mountain, leading his team through storms that could have swallowed them whole. But truth and fame do not always travel the same road. The world beyond Alaska has little patience for the long, complicated telling. It wants a hero it can place on a postcard. Sepala watches this unfold with a quiet sort of resignation. He speaks when asked, writes letters to set the record straight, but he understands the nature of stories once they leave the hands of those who lived them. In New York, he walks beside Togo, who is brought later for recognition. But the crowds are thinner now. The applause is polite, not thunderous. The moment has passed, the headline already written. In the years that follow, Balto lives out his fame. He tours with Kaizen, appears at events, becomes a living symbol of the Serum Run. Yet fame for a sled dog is a strange thing. It cannot be explained to the one who holds it. Balto never knows why he is paraded before crowds or why strangers call his name. For him, there is only the scent of the air, the press of bodies, and the unfamiliar rhythm of streets where no snow lies beneath his paws. Togo, meanwhile, leaves Alaska for Maine, where Sepala moves his kennel. The winters there are gentler, the trails shorter. Yet even in rest, there is dignity in him, the quiet authority of a leader who has nothing left to prove. Visitors who know his story come sometimes, leaning over the fence to see the dog who once led a team across the frozen Norton Sound. They leave with the same thought, that greatness does not require the gaze of the world. Time, as it always does, begins to soften the edges of memory. For those in Nome, the blizzard fades into the background of other winters. For the wider world, The Serum Run becomes a story told to children, and in those tellings the names grow fewer. Soon Balto alone remains, his statue weathered by seasons, his bronze eyes gazing forever toward a horizon he never truly crossed. Yet somewhere, in the deep quiet of history, Togo's pawprints remain pressed into the snow. They are not marked by monuments, but by the unseen miles that live in the records, in Sepala's own words, in the testimonies of the mushers who knew the truth. It will take decades before that truth rises again, before the world begins to remember the dog who ran farthest. For now, though, the story belongs to Balto. It belongs to the city that raised his statue, to the children who place mittens on his bronze paws in winter, to the tourists who read the plaque and imagine the final sprint into Nome. And perhaps that is enough. For stories, like trails, are never travelled in quite the same way twice. In the quiet of a Maine winter, Togo sleeps. Snow drifts against the walls outside, the wind pressing softly at the windows. His eyes flicker beneath closed lids, as if following some dream of movement. In that dream, the trail is endless, the harness is firm, and the voice calling him forward is one he knows well. In time, all that is left are the years, the memories, and the quiet passing of seasons. But before the snow settles for good, Togo will see one last winter, a final stretch of trail, not measured in miles, but in moments. Winter settles differently in Maine. Here, the snow does not arrive with the fierce bite of the Arctic, but with a slower hand, layering the fields in white that glows under a gentler sun. The air carries the scent of pine, the wind bending trees instead of howling through endless tundra. It is here, far from the icebound coast of Nome, that Togo spends his last years. The kennel is smaller now. Sepala has brought only a few dogs east with him, the best of his bloodlines, the ones who will carry forward the strength and endurance he prized. They sleep in wooden shelters, their breath puffing into the cold, their eyes alert to the sound of his step. Among them, Togo rests, older now, his muzzle silvered, his gait slower, but still carrying the quiet authority of a leader. Sepala moves through these days with a softer pace as well. The years of racing, of testing his team against storms and distances few dared to attempt, are behind him. He tends to the dogs with the same care he once gave them on the trail. The same measured hands that adjusted their harnesses, the same voice that called them forward, and always Togo receives a little more. A longer stroke of the hand, a deeper look into his eyes, as if each moment together must be counted. Sometimes, when the snow is firm and the air is still, Sepala will hitch a small team and let Togo take the lead again, not for miles, not for speed, but simply for the joy of seeing him in the harness. The younger dogs fall in behind, and for a short stretch of trail, Togo's stride quickens, his head lifts, and the years seem to fall away. He moves as he always did, as if the snow were made for him, as if the path ahead were his to carve. But even these short runs grow rarer. The stiffness in his joints lingers longer now, and the rest that follows lasts well into the next day. The time has come for Togo to watch more than to lead, to greet the younger dogs as they return, to lie in the sun that spills across the snow outside his shelter. He listens to the wind in the trees, to the creak of the kennel gate, and sometimes, in the stillness, he seems to listen for something farther away. The faint jingle of a harness, the call of a voice carried over ice. Visitors come, drawn by the stories they have heard. They arrive bundled against the Maine winter, their breath clouding in the air, their eyes searching for the dog whose name is spoken with quiet respect among mushers. When they see him, they often pause, surprised at how small he seems, how ordinary in his stillness. But then he lifts his head, and in his gaze they see what the miles have left behind. The steadiness, the intelligence, the fierce will that once pulled men and dogs through storms that could have swallowed them whole. Some bring photographs of Balto's statue in New York, speaking of the other dog as if the two were rivals. Sepola smiles politely, though he knows better. The trail was never a contest, it was a chain, and each link mattered. But he also knows that Togo's link was the longest and the most fragile. Without it, the chain might have broken. The seasons turn. Spring softens the snow, and the trails give way to damp earth. Summer brings green fields and the scent of rain. In autumn, the leaves fall in a bright rustle, and the air cools again. Togo feels each change, but it is the first true snow that always draws a spark from him. The way the world turns white again, the way the air sharpens and the light shifts, it is as though the land is calling back some part of him that never left Alaska. In the final winter, Sepola builds a bed for him in the warmest corner of the kennel, lining it with blankets. Togo sleeps more now, his breaths deep and slow. When Sepola kneels beside him, he still lifts his head, still meets his eyes, but the space between those moments grows longer. Outside, the snow falls in a hush, covering the hills and fields in a clean, unbroken sheet. One night, as the wind settles and the moonlight spills over the snow, Sepola sits beside him for a long time. He runs a hand through the fur along his neck, remembering every mile. The frozen rivers, the mountains, the sea ice under a black sky. He remembers the moments when all seemed lost, and the way Togo never faltered. When the end comes, it is quiet. There is no storm, no race to finish, no crowd waiting at the edge of town. Only the snow outside, the warmth of blankets, and the hand of the man who trusted him more than any other. Togo slips away as he once ran, steady, without hesitation, as if the trail ahead is simply the next part of the journey. In the days that follow, Sepola buries him in the place where the first light touches the snow in the morning. He marks it with a stone, simple and unadorned. For a time the paw prints in the snow remain, leading away from that place and fading into the white. Then the wind covers them, as it always does. Yet Sepola knows, and those who truly understand the trail know, that no wind can cover the path Togo carved through history. It is not marked on any map, but it is there, running across ice and time, a line of courage that will never melt. In the quiet after loss, the miles remain, and the story begins to take its final shape. Soon, it will pass from living memory into legend, where paw prints echo long after the snow has fallen. The years move on, as they always do. Snow falls over new winters, drapes new landscapes, and buries the tracks of old journeys. But some trails, invisible to the eye, remain forever marked. The Serum Run of 1925 is one of them. Time has softened the edges of its telling. No one now can hear the exact sound of sled runners slicing over ice, nor feel the sting of that specific wind against their cheek. Yet when the story is spoken, the air seems to change. The listener might lean closer without realizing, as though straining to catch the far-off jingle of harness bells. The tale is passed on, first by those who lived it, then by those who heard it secondhand, and now bowed by voices that know only the echo. It travels in classrooms, in campfire stories, in quiet retellings when snow presses against a window. Always, it begins with the sickness in Nome, the vials of serum waiting in anchorage, and the long, treacherous miles between. The men are remembered, yes. Hardy, stubborn, faces weathered by cold and resolve. But it is the dogs who capture the deepest part of the story. They become more than animals. They are symbols, almost mythic, of something the modern world fears it has forgotten. A raw and unpolished kind of loyalty. Balto stands proud in New York's Central Park, frozen forever in bronze. Visitors read the inscription and perhaps imagine that he alone carried the serum from Anchorage to Nome. But the truth, always quieter, always less eager to shine, lies in the relay. 20 mushers, dozens of dogs, each pushing against fatigue and frostbite, each holding the thread of hope until they could pass it on. And among them, Togo, the old soul of the trail, who led the longest and most brutal leg, crossing the thin ice of Norton Sound when the world itself seemed ready to crack beneath them. His name is less known to the casual passerby, yet among those who remember, it holds a reverence that is hard to put into words. Stories like this become more than facts and dates, they become landscapes of the mind. When we close our eyes, we can see the narrow trail lit only by the pale wash of moonlight. We can hear the steady breathing of dogs, the creak of leather harness, the low command of a musher's voice. We can taste the sharp metal of cold in the air. And we know, though we were never there, that this was not simply a feat of endurance, but an act of devotion. In Nome, the memory is tangible. Photographs still hang in small museums. Descendants of the mushers and townspeople still tell the tale. In winter, when snow drifts against the buildings and the air feels stripped down to its purest chill, it is almost as though the past has stepped quietly back into place. The trail itself, or what remains of it, is retraced in the modern Iditarod race. But that event, grand and celebrated, is a different creature. The Serum Run was not for sport. It was a race where winning meant surviving, and there were no cheers along the frozen miles, only the endless hiss of the wind. For those who have run dogs in such weather, the story carries an extra weight. They know the discipline of a lead dog, the subtle shift of muscle before a turn, the way a team reads the land, as though it were a page they've studied all their lives. They understand the bond, unspoken, absolute, that is forged when both man and dog trust each other with their lives. Legends often swell with each telling, details bending to fit the shape of memory. But the heart of this story does not need exaggeration. It is already large enough to hold all the courage it contains. In the quiet of evening, when the house is still and snowflakes begin to drift past the window, one might imagine those teams still out there somewhere. Not as ghosts, but as a feeling, as a kind of current running through the frozen air. You could close your eyes and hear them, the rhythmic pad of paws, the runners sliding over ice, the breath of a team pulling together against all odds. For some, the story is about heroism. For others, it is about the shared work of many hands and paws, each one essential. But perhaps, in the end, it is simply about movement toward hope, no matter how far the trail, no matter how bitter the wind. Because even now, in a world lit by electric lamps and warmed by central heat, there are still long winters to cross. Not on sled runners, perhaps, but in the heart, in the mind, in the quiet trials no one else can see. And in those moments the lesson remains. You keep going. You find your footing on the ice. You hold the line steady for those who come after. The paw prints are gone from the snow. The harnesses have been hung, the sleds stored away. But the story, the living, breathing thing of it, keeps running. Across years, across generations, it moves like a team pulling together, steady and strong. Somewhere, far from here, the northern wind is rising. It carries with it the faint, deliberate beat of paws over snow, the whisper of a trail stretching out into the white unknown. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear the truth the story has always been trying to tell. That even in the coldest places, even in the longest nights, there are still footsteps, or paw prints, moving toward the light. And so the trail fades into silence, yet not into forgetting. For in the quiet heart of winter, some stories never truly end, but wait like unbroken snow for the next set of tracks to appear. And so, as the snow drifts back over Alaska, covering the trail in a white hush, the story of Togo and the Serum Run folds itself into the quiet of night. These were not just miles crossed, but miles given, poured out from hearts that refused to break in the bitterest cold. Men and dogs bound together, pulling not only a sled, but the fragile thread of hope itself across a frozen world. Tonight, that thread has found its way to you, if you listen closely, beyond the reach of time. You might still hear it, the faint jingle of harness bells, the sharp breath of sled dogs in the dark, the steady rhythm of paws pressing into snow. And though the ice has long since melted, their echo still hums in the quiet, as if the candle of that night still burns somewhere, steady against the wind. Thank you for walking and running through history with me tonight. Your presence here turns an old story into something alive again, a shared warmth that travels farther than the cold could ever reach. You are not just a listener, you are part of the long remembering. Now let the day fall from your shoulders. The world outside can wait. The trail is behind us. All that remains is the soft comfort of rest. May your dreams carry you gently through the night, as sure and safe as a sled gliding over snow. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in. If this story brought you peace, you are always welcome to return to sit by the firelight of history again. Sleep well, my friend, beneath the hush of history's lullaby, and may you wake to a world just a little warmer.